Something about this story never quite made sense. The #1 late-night show in America didn't fade away because people stopped watching. It didn't end because the host wanted out. In fact, the show was still pulling in nearly 3 million viewers every night. It had dominated ratings for 9 straight seasons. It had just won its first Emmy. And then suddenly, CBS cancelled it anyway. Just like that. But here's the strange part. Only days before the announcement, Stephen Colbert said something on air that may have made some very powerful people uncomfortable. And once you hear the timing, it becomes very hard to ignore. Stephen Colbert was actually on vacation when the decision was made. He had no idea it was coming. His manager had known for weeks but kept quiet while executives at CBS quietly decided that one of the most successful late-night franchises in television history was over. Imagine that for a second. You step away for a short break, thinking your show is thriving, while behind closed doors your entire future is being erased. Colbert finally got the call on July 16, 2025. The next morning, he walked onto the stage at the Ed Sullivan Theatre and told the audience himself before CBS could announce it on their own terms. What made that moment hit so hard was how calm he was.
No rage. No meltdown.
He thanked the 200 people who worked on the show every single day. He talked about how grateful he was for the last decade. And then he quietly said something that stunned the audience. He said he wasn't being replaced. The entire show was simply disappearing. Not rebooted. Not handed to a new host. Just gone. And suddenly this wasn't only about Stephen Colbert losing a job. It was about the end of a television institution that had existed since 1993, first with David Letterman and then with Colbert. Over 30 years of late-night history erased overnight. But why would CBS kill something so successful? The audience immediately started booing. Colbert looked out at them and simply said he felt the same way. That one sentence told people everything they needed to know. This wasn't planned. This wasn't mutual. And then the story got even stranger. 3 days before CBS officially announced the cancellation, Colbert went after Paramount on air. Paramount, the company that owned CBS, had agreed to pay $16 million to settle a lawsuit brought by Donald Trump over a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. Colbert looked directly into the camera and called the payment what he believed it looked like. A bribe. Plain and simple. 3 days later, his show was cancelled. CBS immediately insisted the decision had nothing to do with politics. They said it was purely financial. But almost nobody believed the timing was a coincidence. Senator Elizabeth Warren publicly questioned whether political pressure played a role. The Writers Guild pushed for an investigation. Even more suspicious, Paramount was in the middle of trying to complete a massive merger deal that required government approval. And at the same time, federal regulators had already been warning late-night hosts about political broadcasting rules. Then the merger approval came shortly after the cancellation. You can see why people started connecting dots. Donald Trump didn't exactly calm the speculation either. He celebrated publicly online, saying he was thrilled Colbert had been fired. Then he casually suggested Jimmy Kimmel might be next. That's when Colbert responded with one of the most direct monologues of his entire career. The gloves were officially off. But was this really political revenge? Or was there another side to the story nobody wanted to admit? Because the uncomfortable truth is this. The Late Show was losing money. A lot of money. Reports claimed the show was bleeding somewhere between $30 and $40 million a year. Late-night television had been quietly struggling for years. Streaming changed everything. Younger audiences stopped watching live TV. Advertising money moved online. Even Colbert's viral clips getting millions of views on YouTube weren't helping CBS much because those platforms kept most of the revenue. The old television model simply wasn't working anymore. CBS had already cancelled James Corden's show and replaced it with something much cheaper. But Colbert was different. He was the flagship. The face of the network. The prestige host. And what made insiders suspicious was how quickly the decision happened. Colbert apparently wasn't even given much opportunity to discuss cost-cutting options. To many people inside the building, that suggested money wasn't the entire story. Especially when CBS announced the replacement for the time slot would be a lighter comedy format specifically designed to avoid political controversy. That detail raised a lot of eyebrows. But to really understand why this moment mattered so much, you have to understand who Stephen Colbert actually is. Long before the fame, before the Emmys, before the political monologues, Colbert experienced unimaginable loss. He was only 10 years old when his father and 2 brothers died in a plane crash. In one afternoon, his entire family changed forever. Most people would never fully recover from something like that. But Colbert rarely talks about it for sympathy. Instead, he often speaks about how his mother taught him how to survive grief without becoming bitter. Broken, maybe, but not bitter. That pain shaped everything about him. He later admitted he went through a deep crisis of faith in his early 20s and even considered himself an atheist for a period of time before eventually returning to his Catholic beliefs after what he described as a random encounter with a stranger. Comedy became his way of making sense of difficult things, not escaping them, holding them at arm's length long enough to understand them. And maybe that's why his interviews always felt different. They weren't just celebrity conversations. They felt human. He studied theater, moved to Chicago, and joined the famous Second City Improv group where he met future collaborators Amy Sedaris and Paul Dinello. Together, they created strange, funny sketch shows before Colbert eventually landed at The Daily Show in 1997. At first, it was only a trial run. A producer took a chance on him. That chance changed television history. Years later, when Colbert replaced David Letterman in 2015, many people thought it wouldn't work. Letterman had owned that time slot for more than 2 decades. And Colbert faced another problem. Audiences knew him as a character from The Colbert Report, a fake conservative pundit. Now he had to appear as himself.
No mask.
No act. Just Stephen Colbert. The first year was rough. Ratings struggled. Critics were unconvinced. There was even a disastrous post-Super Bowl episode that reviewers absolutely destroyed. It looked like the experiment might fail completely. Then the 2016 election changed everything. Almost overnight, Colbert found his voice. His monologues became sharper, more personal, more fearless. The show transformed from a standard late-night program into something emotionally charged and politically urgent. Viewers responded immediately. Ratings exploded. By the next season, The Late Show became the highest-rated late-night show in America for the first time since the Letterman era. And it stayed there for 9 straight years. But the real magic wasn't just the ratings. It was the conversations. Colbert had a way of getting guests to open up in ways they normally never would. He talked with Joe Biden about grief during the pandemic. He discussed faith with Dua Lipa in the middle of what should have been a routine celebrity interview. He got Michelle Obama to joke around with impressions on national television. People trusted him. And trust like that in television is rare. As the final episodes approached, something unusual happened. The late-night world stopped acting like competitors. Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, and John Oliver all appeared together on the show during Colbert's final weeks. Not to promote themselves. Not to compete. Just to support him. The atmosphere felt less like television and more like old friends gathering around someone they respected deeply. These were people who had survived years of chaos together. The pandemic. Political pressure. Writers' strikes. During the 2023 strike, the 5 hosts even launched a podcast together called Strike Force 5 to help support their staff members who suddenly had no income. It reminded viewers that behind the competition, these people genuinely cared about one another. Then came the moment nobody expected. David Letterman returned to the Ed Sullivan Theatre, the building he had made famous. The audience exploded into applause. Letterman openly admitted he was angry about the cancellation. He reminded everyone that no network could take away a person's voice. And then he delivered a final line aimed squarely at CBS that left absolutely no doubt how he felt. Even Barack Obama appeared during the farewell run and joked that maybe Colbert should run for office someday. It sounded funny at first. But after everything that had happened, people weren't entirely sure he was joking. The final week of shows turned into something bigger than television. Jon Stewart appeared alongside Steven Spielberg. Bruce Springsteen performed. Colbert even turned his famous question-at interview segment onto himself, finally answering the strange questions he had spent years asking everyone else. And for the finale, the guest list looked almost unreal. Kimmel, Fallon, Meyers, Oliver, Letterman, Tom Hanks, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Pedro Pascal, The Strokes. It felt less like the ending of a TV show and more like the closing night of an era. And maybe the strangest part of all is that Colbert already had another dream waiting for him. Months before the cancellation became public, he announced he would be writing a new The Lord of the Rings project alongside his son Peter. For years, Colbert had been known as one of the world's biggest Tolkien fans, the kind of fan who could recite entire character histories from memory on live television. He had quietly wanted to pursue this project for a long time but knew the Late Show schedule made it impossible. Then suddenly, without warning, his calendar opened up. 11 Emmy Awards, 2 Grammys, 3 Peabody Awards, more than 1,800 episodes, the longest ratings winning streak in Late Show history. And somehow, after all of that, the show still ended before anyone expected it to. Maybe that's why this story hit people so hard. Because underneath all the politics and corporate decisions was a man who spent his entire life turning pain into connection. A man who lost his father and brothers as a child, struggled through doubt and anxiety as a young adult, and still somehow became the most trusted voice in late-night television. When the audience booed after hearing the show was ending, Colbert looked at them and quietly admitted he felt exactly the same way. And maybe that's the real question at the center of all this. Was The Late Show cancelled simply because the numbers no longer worked? Or did Stephen Colbert become too expensive in another way entirely?